My developer stole $180,000 from 47 families. I made sure he's spending the next 12 years in federal prison. Original post. 8 years of packed lunches. 8 years of saying, "Not yet," to everything. Then one man with a nice smile took it all in one afternoon. I need to write this down because even now, 3 years after it ended, I still don't fully believe it happened. Maybe putting it here will help someone else see the warning signs I missed. Or maybe it'll help me finally process what we went through. I'm a high school math teacher. My wife is a nurse in the pediatric ICU. We met in college, got married at 26, and immediately started dreaming about our future home. The problem was, we lived in a city where housing prices seemed designed specifically to crush those dreams. Our rental apartment was the kind of place that looked acceptable in photos but revealed its true nature the moment you moved in. The heating worked when it felt like it. The neighbors above us had what I can only describe as a nocturnal bowling habit. The kitchen was so small that my wife and I had developed an elaborate dance to avoid colliding while cooking. But we had a plan. Every month, we transferred money into our savings account before we paid for anything else. We drove a 2009 Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on it. We packed lunches religiously, mine in a dented metal lunchbox I'd had since college, hers in a thermal bag she'd gotten free from a nursing conference. We didn't take vacations. We didn't eat out. When friends invited us to destination weddings, we sent gifts and apologies. 2 more years, my wife would say when the apartment flooded after heavy rain. Just 2 more years. It took 8. By the time we had $180,000 saved, we were experts at delayed gratification. We'd watched friends buy houses, have children, take trips to Europe. We'd smiled and said, "Someday," so many times the word had lost all meaning. Then we found greenfield residences. The development was everything we'd imagined. A mid-rise building in a transitioning neighborhood, close to both our workplaces, with modern units at prices that seemed almost too reasonable. The marketing materials were beautiful, sleek renderings showing exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, a rooftop garden. The location was perfect, close to a new metro station that was breaking ground the following year. Our first visit to the sales office was like stepping into a dream. The space was professionally designed with a scale model of the building under glass, sample materials mounted on the wall, and a massive screen cycling through 3D walkthroughs of the units. The sales manager was a woman in her 40s with a warm smile and an encyclopedic knowledge of the project. She answered every question before we could finish asking it. But it was the developer himself who closed us. He came in during our second visit, supposedly by coincidence. 50-ish, silver-haired, wearing an expensive but understated suit. He shook our hands firmly, looked us in the eyes, and asked about our lives. When we told him we were a teacher and a nurse, he nodded with what seemed like genuine respect. "This is exactly who I'm building for," he said. "Working families who deserve better than what this market offers them. I grew up in a family like yours. My father was a firefighter. My mother was a secretary. They never got to own their own place." He showed us 3D models of our future home. He shook my hand. The whole time he knew he was stealing everything we had. The sales office had blueprints and permits displayed on the walls. The construction site was active. We drove by on a weekend and saw workers, equipment, a foundation being poured. The company had a professional website with a portfolio of completed projects in other states. Everything checked out. We signed the purchase agreement. We handed over our $180,000 deposit, everything we had, everything we'd built over 8 years of sacrifice. The developer clapped me on the shoulder as we left. 18 months, he said. You'll be moving in before you know it. Update 1. The warning signs I ignored. For the first few months, everything seemed normal. We received monthly construction updates with photos showing progress, foundation work, steel framing going up, the first floor taking shape. The emails were professional, detailed, and reassuring. Around month 6, the updates became less frequent. Monthly became every 6 weeks. Then every 2 months. The photos started looking similar, just different angles of the same stage of construction. I called the sales manager. She was friendly but vague. "Permit delays with the city," she explained. "You know how bureaucracy is. But we're pushing through. Should be back on track soon." I mentioned it to my wife that night. "You worry too much," she said, not unkindly. "These things always have delays. Remember when my parents' basement renovation took twice as long as promised? It's construction. It happens." She was right. I was probably being paranoid. But I started driving by the site on weekends. Not every weekend, I didn't want to become that person, but often enough to keep an eye on things. And what I saw didn't match the optimistic emails. The same framing stood month after month. The same equipment sat in the same positions. Sometimes I'd see workers, but they seemed to be doing maintenance rather than actual construction. One Saturday, I counted the same 6 workers standing around drinking coffee for over an hour. I mentioned this to my wife. She sighed. "You're going to make yourself crazy," she said. "They're probably between phases. Or waiting for an inspection. There are a million explanations." I wanted to believe her. I really did. Then I found the Facebook group. Someone had created a private group for Greenfield Residences buyers. There were about 30 members, and the posts were a mix of excited anticipation and growing concern. Some people were tracking construction the same way I was. Others had started asking questions about the permit delays. One man, an accountant he said, had done some digging. The developer's previous projects, the ones shown on the website, didn't seem to have the reviews or completion records you'd expect. Another member noticed that the company's business registration had some irregularities. I showed my wife the group. She read the post silently, then handed my phone back. "Internet speculation," she said. "People get anxious and start feeding each other's fears. The building is there. The permits are real. I'm sure everything is fine." I wanted to push back. I wanted to say that my gut was screaming at me. But I'd been the pessimist in our relationship for 8 years, always the one counseling caution while she dreamed bigger. Maybe she was right. Maybe I needed to learn to trust. So I ignored my gut. I stopped going to the site. I muted the Facebook group. The police said, "Civil matter. 47 families robbed and it's a civil matter." That's when I knew no one was coming to save us. Update 2. The collapse. Month 14. It was a Saturday. My wife was working a double shift, and I had nothing to do. Without really planning it, I found myself driving toward the construction site. What I saw made my blood run cold. The site was abandoned. Completely abandoned. No workers. No equipment. The partially completed building stood like a skeleton against the gray sky, but the fence was locked, the construction trailers were gone, and there was no sign of any activity. Weeds had started growing in the dirt lot where trucks used to park. I sat in my car for a long time, trying to convince myself there was an explanation. Maybe they were between contractors. Maybe there was a holiday I'd forgotten. Maybe. I called the sales office. The number had been disconnected. I drove there. The sleek space where we'd signed our lives away was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no scale model, no marketing materials. Just bare walls and a "for lease" sign in the window. I pulled out my phone and went to the company website. Error 404. Page not found. I sat in that empty parking lot for an hour, staring at my phone, trying to find any trace of the company that had taken our money. The business registration showed the company had been dissolved 2 weeks earlier. The developer's LinkedIn profile was gone. The sales manager's phone went straight to a generic voicemail. 8 years of packed lunches. 8 years of saying, "Not yet," to everything. Then one man with a nice smile took it all in one afternoon. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember what I said to my wife when she got back from her shift. I remember her face going pale, then red, then pale again. I remember her sitting down slowly on our terrible couch in our terrible apartment and saying, "No. No, 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 no." I remember thinking, this is it. This is the worst moment of my life. I was wrong. The worst was still coming. Update 3. The discovery. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and dead ends. We filed a police report. The officer was sympathetic but blunt. "This is a civil matter," he said. "You'd need to pursue this through the courts." "He stole our money," I said. "That's theft. That's a criminal matter." The officer shrugged. "Did he give you a contract? Did he promise to build something? Then technically, it's a breach of contract dispute. You need a lawyer." We hired a lawyer, a real estate attorney who came recommended by a friend. His assessment was equally devastating. "Cases like this take years," he said. "Even if you get a judgment, collecting is nearly impossible. These guys know how to hide assets. They use shell companies, offshore accounts, family members' names. You might recover pennies on the dollar, or you might recover nothing at all." My wife cried for the first time that night. Not in front of me, I heard her through the bathroom door, water running to mask the sound. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall and felt something changing inside me. Everyone said hire a lawyer and wait. The system let him do this twice before. I wasn't going to wait politely while he spent my money. The Facebook group had exploded. Every day, new members joined, other buyers who'd made the same terrible discovery. Within a week, we had 47 confirmed victims. 47 families who had handed over their savings for a promise that was never going to be kept. The total stolen, $8.2 million. I started organizing. I created a shared spreadsheet where everyone could log their purchase agreements, payment records, correspondence with the company, everything. I'm a math teacher. I solve problems with logic. He picked the wrong victim. What emerged was damning. The developer had used a fake name, or rather, a legal alias that he'd established specifically for this purpose. His real identity connected him to 2 previous developments in other states, both of which had ended similarly. Investors defrauded. Projects abandoned. A trail of ruined families in his wake. In both previous cases, he'd walked away clean. Civil suits that went nowhere. No criminal charges. A system that treated massive fraud as a paperwork problem. But here's what burned me the most. While we were mourning our lost savings, the developer was living large. One of our victims was a PI. Well, not professionally, but he'd been one in a past career. He tracked the developer's current address. The man was living in a $1.2 million house in an affluent suburb, registered under a shell company that itself was owned by another shell company that traced back to his wife's maiden name. His wife drove a Mercedes. His kids went to private school. All paid for with our savings. Our dreams. Our future. I told my wife what I'd found. Her jaw tightened. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Whatever it takes," I said. Update 4, the campaign. I took 2 weeks of sick leave from school. Told the principal I was dealing with a family emergency. In a way, I was. I spent those 2 weeks building a case. The spreadsheet became a database. Every victim's story documented. Every piece of evidence catalogued. Every promise the developer had made, every excuse he'd given, every lie he'd told, all of it organized, cross-referenced, and preserved. I contacted the FBI. I learned that real estate fraud becomes a federal matter under certain conditions. Wire fraud, mail fraud, fraud crossing state lines. Our developer had operated in 3 states now. He'd used email and wire transfers. On paper, this was exactly the kind of case they should care about. The agent I spoke to was cautious. "We get a lot of these," she said. "I can't promise anything. But send me what you have." I sent everything. A 30-page summary document. The full database of evidence. Victim testimonies. Records of his previous schemes. I filed complaints with the State Attorney General's office. With the FTC. With the SEC, just in case there was any securities angle I was missing. But I knew that government agencies move slowly. I knew that the developer was probably already planning his exit strategy. Maybe even preparing to disappear entirely. I needed to apply pressure from multiple directions. I found a journalist. She worked for a local television station, one that had won awards for investigative reporting. I called her producer, pitched the story in 30 seconds, and waited. She called back within an hour. 47 families, she said. $8 million. Why haven't I heard about this? Because the police call it a civil matter, I said. Because there's no easy villain to put on camera. Because he's hiding behind shell companies and fake names. But you have his real identity. I have everything. The story aired 3 weeks later. It was devastating. The journalist had done her own investigation, confirming everything we'd found and uncovering more. She had footage of the abandoned construction site, interviews with tear-stained victims, records of his previous frauds, even a confrontation with a developer outside his $1 million home. He'd tried to hide his face and speed away in his Lexus. Exactly the kind of footage that makes a story go viral. And it did go viral. Local news picked it up. Then regional. Then national outlets started calling. The developer's photograph was everywhere, along with his real name and a detailed accounting of his crimes. I didn't stop there. I found out where he lived. I found out his wife worked as an office manager at a private medical practice. I found out his kids attended a prestigious academy. I found out he was a member of a country club and a local business association. I didn't harass these people. I didn't threaten them. I just made sure they knew who they were associated with. I sent a polite letter to his wife's employer, with supporting documentation, expressing concern that she might be benefiting from proceeds of fraud. I sent similar letters to the country club, the business association, the academy's board. I created a website documenting everything. Every piece of evidence, every victim story, every lie he'd told. I made sure it ranked highly when anyone searched his name. The pressure mounted. His wife's employer let her go, not my intent, but not something I lost sleep over. The country club terminated his membership. Former business associates distanced themselves publicly. And then the FBI called. Update 5. The Justice. The federal investigation moved faster than I dared hope. Later, I learned why. We weren't the only ones pushing. The developer's previous victims in other states had been watching the news coverage. They'd reached out to the FBI independently, providing additional evidence. Former employees came forward. Business partners who'd suspected fraud but stayed quiet finally spoke up. The FBI executed a search warrant on his home. They found exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd been defrauding people for years: multiple identities, offshore accounts, documents showing he'd been planning to dissolve the company and skip town months before construction actually stopped. They also found a ticket to Costa Rica. One way. When they arrested him at the airport with a ticket to Costa Rica, I felt nothing. Just exhaustion. And relief he couldn't do this to anyone else. I wasn't there for the arrest, but one of the FBI agents called me afterward. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. He had 2 suitcases and his laptop. No return ticket. Another week, and he would have been gone. The trial took 18 months. I attended every day I could. My wife came when her schedule allowed. We sat with other victims, a community forged in shared trauma, watching as the man who'd stolen our futures tried to explain himself. His defense was pathetic. He claimed the project had failed due to circumstances beyond his control: market conditions, contractor disputes, permit problems. He claimed he'd intended to complete the building. He claimed he was a victim of bad luck, not a perpetrator of fraud. The jury didn't buy it. Neither did the judge. Guilty on 23 counts. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. The sentencing was 6 months later. The judge invited victims to speak. I stood at the podium, my prepared statement shaking in my hands, and looked directly at the man who had stolen 8 years of my life. "You shook my hand," I said. "You looked me in the eye. You told me you understood working families because you'd grown up in one. And the whole time, you were counting my money in your head." He didn't react. Didn't flinch. Whatever capacity for shame he might have once had was long gone. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole before he'd served at least 10. The asset recovery took another year. The FBI and DOJ had frozen his accounts, seized his properties, clawed back money from offshore havens. When the dust settled, the victims received 94% of their losses. 94%. Not everything, but more than I'd ever dared hope for. I got a check for $169,200. I held it in my hands and waited to feel something: triumph, vindication, closure. Instead, I felt tired. Just so incredibly tired. Final update. Moving on. 3 years have passed since the sentencing. We bought an apartment last spring. Different neighborhood, different developer, one I researched obsessively before signing anything. I checked their previous projects personally, drove to each site, talked to residents. I verified their permits independently with the city. I had our lawyer review every document 3 times. The closing took 4 hours because I questioned everything. The seller's agent looked at me like I was insane. I didn't care. I'm typing this from our living room. The morning light comes through the windows we picked out ourselves. My wife is in the kitchen making breakfast, an actual kitchen with actual counter space where we don't have to dance around each other. She comes in and hands me a coffee. Looks at what I'm writing. "Almost done?" she asks. "Almost." She sits beside me on the couch we bought together, in the space that finally belongs to us. "It's still hard to believe sometimes," she says, "that we actually made it." "We did," I say. "We won." He's serving 12 years. We got 94% back. She nods. Squeezes my hand. "So why do I still check our bank account 3 times a day?" I continue. "Why do I flinch when someone offers a handshake and a contract? We got justice. But I'll never get back the person I was before I learned how easily someone can smile while stealing your future." She doesn't say anything. There's nothing to say. We both know I'm different now. More cautious. More cynical. Slower to trust. The developer is in a federal facility in Pennsylvania. I know because I check. I check his release date, calculated to the day. I have alerts set for any mention of his name, any parole hearing, any legal development. I'll probably always have them. My therapist says this is normal. That trauma changes us in ways we don't always want to be changed. That healing isn't about going back to who we were, but about finding peace with who we've become. I'm working on it. What I can tell you is this: if something feels wrong, trust that feeling. If a deal seems too good, question it harder. If someone looks you in the eye and promises you your dreams, make them prove it 20 different ways before you believe them. And if the worst happens, if someone steals everything you've built, don't accept it. Don't wait for a system that treats theft as paperwork. Don't let them tell you it's a civil matter when 47 families lose their futures. Organize. Document. Expose. Fight. I'm a high school math teacher. I solve problems with logic. He picked the wrong victim. Edit. Thank you for the awards and comments. For those asking, yes, you can look up the case. The developer's actual name and the case details are public record. But I'm not including them here because this post isn't about revenge or spectacle. It's about warning others. Check your developers. Verify independently. Trust your gut. Second edit. Several people have asked about the Facebook group of victims. It's still active. We've become something like a family, people who went through trauma together and came out the other side. We do an annual meetup now. Last year, 3 families brought their kids, born after the nightmare ended, playing together while their parents talked about how far we've come. It was strange and beautiful and sad all at once. Final edit. My wife read this before I posted it. She cried. Then she hugged me and said, "I'm sorry I told you to stop being paranoid." I told her it wasn't her fault. She was being optimistic. I was being cautious. We needed both, and we got through it together. That's what matters. Flexed biceps, we won. But the cost was more than money.